Good afternoon. I will reconvene this regular meeting of the Board of Lane County Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, July 16th, 2024. Welcome back and welcome to those who were not with us for the morning. Thank you for being here. We kick off our afternoon agenda with a brief item from Public Works. This is a first reading of a draft ordinance number 24-06. In the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 2 to adopt immunity from liability arising from use of trails or structures in a public easement or unimproved right-of-way and declaring an emergency. Staff has requested a second reading and hearing date be set for a date and time certain of July 30, 2024, 1:30 p.m., and staff will provide a staff report on the item at that time. But Brett Henry, our Parks Division Manager, and Emily Vario from the Office of County Counsel are here today and are available if there are any questions from the board. Seeing none, are there any comments or any other items from staff before we move forward on this?
Chair, I have just a few things to say.
Please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Brett Henry. I'm the Parks Division Manager for Lane County. With me is Emily Vario. She's the Assistant County Counsel here for the county. This work session item is a proposed addition to Lane Code Chapter 2.060, County Lands and Buildings, which establishes provisions allowed on county-owned property. A bit of background: on March 3rd, 2024, the Oregon Legislature passed Senate Bill 1576, which effectively amended ORS 105688, recreational immunity, by defining that recreation includes walking, running, and bicycling. Staff is proposing that Lane County adopt an ordinance to opt in to the immunities provided by ORS 105688, which provides additional protection by limiting liability for injury or property damage arising from the use of trails or structures in public easements or in unimproved right-of-ways. It's a mouthful. The reference ordinance is ordinance number 24-06 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 2 to adopt immunity from liability arising from use of trails or structures in a public easement or unimproved right-of-way and declaring an emergency. Adoption of Ordinance 24-6 would effectively amend Chapter Code, or Lane County Chapter Code 2 by adding a section 2.060.010, which authorizes Lane Code to opt in to the immunities provided in ORS 105688. The item before you today is a request that the board approves a first reading and set a second reading and public hearing for July 30th, 2024. The time certain is set at 1:30 p.m. The meeting will be in hybrid format and held at the Lane County Public Service Building here inside Harris Hall in Eugene. At that time, staff will provide a more comprehensive report and the opportunity for public comment. With that, I conclude the staff presentation for this first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Anything from Office of County Counsel?
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and County Commissioners. If you don't have any questions for me, I don't have anything additionally.
Thank you. Then I will look for a motion and we will get more information, have a discussion on this item should the motion pass.
Chair, I move to approve the first reading of Ordinance 24-06 and to set the second reading and public hearing for July 30th, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. in Lane County Public Service Building, 125 East 8th Ave, Eugene, Oregon.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve the first reading and set the second reading on Ordinance 24-06. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Approval of the first reading, setting the second reading and public hearing on Ordinance number 24-06 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 2 to adopt immunity from liability arising from the use of trails or structures in a public easement or unimproved right-of-way and declaring an emergency. Thank you so much. We will see you on the 30th. Right. That takes us into our item 10 on our agenda today, which is from County Administration, And this is a continuation and discussion. We have before us 3 board orders in the matter of potentially referring items to the ballot on amendments to Lane County's Home Rule Charter. And I will welcome Judy Williams, Chief of Staff, to the table, and our interim lead County Counsel, Liani, who is here from Miller Nash to provide any support we may need from the Office of Legal Counsel. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Williams, unless our administrator wanted to, no, right, turn it over to Ms. Williams to give a brief overview and set us up for this item.
Move this closer, as I heard there was trouble hearing in the back. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I'm just going to do a very brief overview. I know we've had a couple public hearings recently, which you've had that overview. So this is just general information. Judy Williams, myself, and Jenna Cusimano has been staffing the Charter Review Committee, which is part of the requirement for the Charter. That committee has met for almost a year, and their responsibility was to propose, to review the Charter and make some recommendations. That group has made recommendations, and there are 6 that we have discussed so far. There are 3 section repeals and 3 section revisions. We've had work sessions over the past several months. We've had 2 public hearings, and we've had some deliberations. On July 9th, the board did give direction to hear and to receive 3 separate board orders, as the chair mentioned, and those are in your packet, and I'll briefly walk through them and have them up on the slides in case there's any question as to what those are. But again, these are just for the repeal discussions only. So the 3 items, Section 32 is removal of what's called spending limitation, and that is briefly a little bit of an outdated, established prior to current state laws that do govern spending by county and jurisdictions. It doesn't quite serve a purpose, but it is not doing harm, but it is one of those items that was recommended by the Charter Review Committee to repeal. Section 33, East Alton Baker Park. Again, a little bit of a historical document, as we do not own the property any longer. So I think there were questions at the last conversation that the board had in terms of, does that change the land use or the use of the property if there was a repeal? And County Council spoke to that it would not have an impact, as it, again, simply we do not have ownership there. And then finally, Section 34 is the income tax cap. And this is a 2% cap with the idea that the money for an income tax would go to public safety. But at the time, there was a companion attempt for an income tax, of which we don't have. So a little bit of, as the chair, I believe, called it, it busies up the charter, but it doesn't provide any harm. But essentially, again, a recommendation from the Charter Review Committee to remove that. So I have those forward for you. I do have motions available, again, based on your discussion on the 9th. We did provide that. So in your board packet and materials that anybody can look to and watch, there is information as to what those ballot titles would look like, the ballot question, and the ballot summaries of those 3 items. One quick final moment before I do kick it back over to you, Chair, is there was a discussion also on the 9th in previous sessions regarding a potential, if the board was interested in having any of these, if we do go forward when placing them on the ballot, you have the opportunity to place it on the state voters pamphlet. So if any of these motions are moving forward and passed, just it could be a general head nods or a motion to seek interest in seating a explanatory statement committee. Again, last discussion, there was a comments that typically that can be established by the county administrator, and then we could come back to you for a board order announcing who is on the committee and what that charge is. So again, no decision or no deadlines in front of you, but we are on track to moving this forward. If the board were interested in putting this on the November ballot, doing so does give you time to do that for the November 2024 election. Thank you. So I'll turn it back over to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, and thanks again for all your work on this. I know Jenna Kuzmano is out today, as is Steve Thiel, who's been working on this item from the Office of County Counsel, and that's why Ms. Reeves is with us at the table on behalf of council today. Colleagues, unless you want a different approach, I would recommend, since these three repeal items are ones we've sort of discussed, and there hasn't been a lot of controversy, or it seems like they're pretty straightforward, and that perhaps the best way to move us ahead on these is, of course, open to a first round of general comment, but then to get some motions on the table, and should they receive seconds and pass, we can have the conversation as they relate to the motion specifically, rather than broadly on the topic of the three repeal items. And then I will just note, once we get through these three, we will then move to the recommendations from our committee and some other requests on behalf of this board for some potential additions, but we'll handle those separately. So for this item, this time, we're just looking at these three repeals. Does anybody wish to make any general comment, questions, or suggest another way of managing these three orders before us?
Chair, if you're ready, I'm ready for a motion.
All right, Vice Chair.
Chair, I'd like to move to approve Order 24071610 in the matter of referring to an amendment to the Lane County Home Rule Charter Section 32, commonly referred to as the spending limitation, be repealed, and direct that the proposed amendments to the Home Rule Charter be presented to the county clerk, and directing the county clerk to place the proposed amendments on the November 5th, 2024 ballot.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve Order 24071610, repealing Section 32 of the Charter. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor of referring this item to the voters signify with an aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. I believe, did I hear an aye from you, Commissioner? Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Order 24-07-16-10 in the matter of referring to election and amendment to the Lane County Home Rule Charter, Section 32. Order 24071611 in the matter of referring to election and amendment to the Lane County Home Rule Charter, Section 33, regarding ownership and management of East Alton Baker Park. Is there a motion?
Ready for a motion, Chair?
Please.
I move to approve Order 24071611 in the matter of referring to the election and amendment to the Lane County Home Rule Charter, Section 33, commonly referred to as the East Alton Baker Park ownership, notation no longer under the county ownership, and direct the proposed amendments to the Home Rule Charter be presented to the county clerk, and directing the county clerk to place the proposed amendments on the November 5th, 2024 ballot.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Is there any discussion to this item? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Order 24-07-16-11 in the matter of referring to election and amendment to the Lane County Home Rule Charter, repeal of Section 33. And one more. 34.
You're good. I'm ready for a motion if you're ready.
Yep, please.
Chair, I'd like to move in the matter referring to election and amendment to the Lane County Home Rule Charter, Section 34, commonly referred to as the income tax cap, and direct that the proposed amendments to the Home Rule Charter be presented to the county clerk, and directing the county clerk to place the proposed amendment on the November 5th, 2024 ballot.
Is there a second?
I'll second again.
Thank you. It's been moved by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve Order 24-07-16-12. Any discussion to this? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Trieger. This one is repealing an income tax cap, and in the charter it specifically mentions that the income tax would be toward public safety. This does not preclude the work of the current Public Safety Committee that is reviewing potential funding for long-term funding or sustainable funding for public safety. It doesn't preclude that by removing this from the charter. Just to remind, we had that discussion at the last board meeting.
We did, and thank you for that clarification, because there may be people who tune in who haven't been part of these ongoing discussions, and that is important to note. Similar with the spending limitation, these are sort of artifacts that relate to items that aren't extant, and this in particular relates to an income tax that doesn't exist. And as our Charter Review Committee mentioned, and again to the public, all these materials are available online, linked to the agenda, that this also doesn't preclude us from considering other taxes, public safety or otherwise, and putting caps in place along with those, should those move forward at a future date. So appreciate you raising that. Just, we lose sight that we're heads down into this all the time, and that other people may be new to the item if they're just watching today for the first time. So thank you for that. So there is a motion and a second on the table. Any other discussion to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Approval of Order 24-07-16-12 in the matter of referring to election and amendment to the Lane County Home Rule Charter, repeal of Section 34. Thank you, everyone. And now we move into discussion of remaining recommendations from the Charter Review Committee and other suggestions. And it looks like staff wants to make a comment on this section of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. But one just quick clarifying as we close out the first part of this discussion, as we have the opportunity again to potentially do 3 separate explanatory statements for those 3 items that are now approved. Is there general agreement to do that for all 3 of those measures, or can I clarify anything? Just making sure that we move forward with as directed by the board with that.
Thank you. Yes, if you want to do that as part of the item, we can do that. I was thinking during assignments we could assign, but if you want to, if it's tidier to do it as part of the item, I'm happy to kick us off on that. I think we should do explanatory statements. I think voters need an explanation. And if I'm understanding you, we could just direct that a committee be formed. We could delegate that to the administrator and staff to form that committee and bring that recommendation back to us. Is that right? We don't have to seat it and do that process.
Correct. Yes.
Great. Then to the board, I see head nods. Yes, looks like that is the direction of the board. Thank you very much. We'll make a note not to ask for that as an assignment later. Then this next section, did you want to walk us through this item as well, Ms. Williams?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just briefly, so that folks listening or here watching can keep track. So thank you for that clarification. So now we're moving to the 3 revisions that the Charter Review Committee had recommended. And those 3 relate to, the first one is really revising the titles and descriptions of commissioner districts. So essentially that one is removing a name, so going to numbers instead of just using the district name. So it would, and I do have an example here to clarify. The second item is revising the redistricting process, which is established in Lane Code here at the county, and establishing a section in the charter to essentially create an independent redistricting committee with some modified changes as well. Again, I will touch on those briefly. And then finally, revision to the Charter Review Committee, Section 35. And then I'll quickly walk through each of these. So that first one, with respect to titles, I think as we've had a lot of conversation around the redistricting process, some concerns from the Charter Review Committee regarding how best to look towards the future in terms of when we are doing some of that redistricting work. But I think one of the examples that it's a little bit easier to follow is in this slide where you can kind of see the current versus recommended, and these are just 3 of the 5 for room on the slide. So it's currently it says, for instance, the first one, the West Lane County District generally comprised of Western Lane County outside of the, pardon me as I move that, outside of the metropolitan area, except as otherwise provided in the charter. The commissioner elected from this district will serve position number 1. And so with that, the recommendation is below. District Number 1, generally comprised of western Lane County outside the metropolitan area, but also including contiguous portions of the county as necessary to comply. So I won't read all of those, but that is the gist of the first recommendation. And then, as mentioned, the second recommendation is about the Independent Redistricting Committee and the functions. So again, not removing it from, it exists currently in Lane Code via ordinance, and so this would establish it in the charter. The primary changes in this item is really having that committee. One, it's getting a little bit of further clarity on when we do redistricting. The current language says the Board of Commissioners shall not less than every 10 years initiate a review. And I think that is open to several interpretations of what that means, so it would be clean up on that specifically. In addition, it would have the charter, the independent redistricting, finalizing and proposing 2 of 4 maps, and then agreeing upon one, and then the board would consider moving that one forward. So it takes that from the Board of County Commissioner having the final say to the Independent Redistricting Committee. And then the final item that was recommended, is the actual charter review committee work itself. And primarily the interest of the committee was really to listen to staff on getting clarity on times. It had very specific language of in July of 2011 you'll do this, and then some calculation that has to happen every year. So it was moving this forward to clarify and also modify the starting date so that we weren't doing a big effort such as redistricting immediately following a charter review committee, so giving a little bit of breath in that moment. So those are the slides that I have as a summary to you, and again, this is that discussion, so I will turn it back over to you, Chair, if there's any further questions that I can help with.
Thank you. So this is a discussion item. We don't have orders in front of us, and there's been a lot of discussion about both these 3 items, as well as a lot and a little discussion depending on which one from some community proposals. So I would just open this up to the board for discussion, requests, or recommendations on how we might proceed. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I have, a question posed to my colleagues on the what I'm going to call issue paper number 1 that was up here that's before us regarding the revision of titles and descriptions of commissioner districts. My question to my colleagues is if there is support to move this forward with a modification for the language for district number 3 and district number 4 to include saying generally comprised of South Eugene, and the other one generally comprised of North Eugene. To be a little bit more specific, there seemed to have been some discussion in the past that was more descriptive of the 2 Eugene districts, instead of them both being identical language. I believe the league even spoke to that at one of our previous meetings. So it would be utilizing most of the language that was proposed by the Charter Review Committee regarding the title change, but with the revision of adding those geographic descriptors for the 2 generally Eugene comprised districts. So the modification would be for them to say generally comprised of South Eugene, and the other one to say generally comprised of North Eugene.
Vice Chair.
little tense up here, so I'll weigh in. Nobody's like talking, but number one, the title districts and numbers only. My constituents have come to me with an overwhelming, resounding no support on this. They believe that it's worded correctly, and they also have recommended that I put it in the public record that this was something even the Charter Review Committee had surveyed, and the survey was not conclusive on wanting the name change. There was 53% that voted not to change the name, 12% voted to change the names, and 110, which was about 34%, voted they were undecided. So I think this is not very clear from the Charter Review Committee's point of view, and I don't support changing this title amendment. Thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner Farr.
A question for Commissioner Buck. So the only change would be that in the general description, it would there'd be no names, only numbers. But in the description of the committees of the districts themselves, it would be 3 and 4 would include North Eugene and South Eugene. That's basically the change that you have from the Charter Review Committee's recommendation.
It would still have the change of District 1, 2, 3, 4, but yes, the general descriptor would be expanded to make those two clarification changes.
And so in the current charter, we don't have that language directly in front of us, but it said the districts are numbered and named. Is that correct? There it is. Thank you.
There it went.
Yeah.
Here it comes again.
Position 1, position 2. So the numbers are in the current charter, as well as the. Okay. All right. That's good. That's my question. Thank you.
Did you want to weigh in, Commissioner Seneca, before I comment?
Yeah, I'm willing to stick with our current charter on this. West Lane has spoke out, and they want to be labeled as West Lane still.
So it's sort of moot because it sounds like there isn't agreement. I think it's important to note here, the recommendation really retains what's essentially in the current, reorders it to lead with district numbers, and I think the motivation and justification behind this was to bring our charter from today forward more into alignment with how every other elected body names their representatives, which is by district or ward number, and then a description of what communities or area that encompasses. But if it's not the will of this board at this time to put something before the voters, as we've said, or at least as I had said, I think it's important that we are in agreement on something like this. So I'm guessing this item not receiving enough support. The one other thing I will say, Commissioner Buck, I really appreciate your working to try to get us to a place where there was sort of a little bit of both worlds. My concern for me, being the South Eugene District Commissioner, or District 3, South Eugene is a neighborhood, and I actually have 7 or 8 recognized city neighborhoods within my commissioner district, and it's very confusing, and folks don't always feel represented or even understand that I'm their commissioner when it's the South Eugene commissioner if they live downtown or they live in Jefferson West Side, just as I'm sure Junction City and Santa Clara, Florence and Mapleton is all West Eugene. East Lane County includes the communities that have the South Lane School District. It's a real mishmash and very confusing when you throw in those kind of identifiers. But again, clearly not a unanimous vision on this board, and I don't know that it's a large enough problem to go through what we're trying to do to solve it with the committee's recommendation at this time. So unless there is further comment or the interest of someone to put a motion on the table to see if we can get somewhere with this, I would say this item has been thoroughly discussed. All right. Then the other 2 items, enshrining the Independent Redistricting Committee and its application process into the charter is one, and then references to the Charter Review Committee themselves, itself, are the other 2 remaining recommended amendments from our committee. And I will open it up to conversation from the board on these remaining items. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. On the second item, which is the redistricting committee. The recommendation by the Charter Review Committee has the Board of County Commissioners choosing the first 5 members from a pool. I'm opposed to that. I believe that the further we can get from the Board of County Commissioners being directly involved with the selection of the redistricting committee, the better we are. So the less direct involvement by the Board of County Commissioners. I believe everybody agrees that the elected body should not be choosing the committee.
Commissioner Seneca.
Yeah, I agree. I believe Charles, he said it earlier today. The people picking their politicians, not politicians picking their people. And, you know, this kind of redistricting is what gets strong majorities on the map making, and I can't support this amendment.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a little bit here that I want to set clear. A couple weeks ago, the Eugene Weekly put an article out in the paper of what was considered and put on the table another proposal that was written by the Harangue and Long firm that came to us that was, quote, snuck in the back door. And I just want to set the record straight that I've got 2 emails in my possession, one dated April 20th of 2020 and one dated April 21st of 2020, that had nearly the identical proposals that the Harangue and Long firm recommended and was suggesting, as they did a few weeks ago when we made this first notice at this board. And I want to note that because I'm curious. Obviously, I wasn't on the board at that time, but that email went to 2 current board members on this board, Commissioner Farr and Commissioner Buck. And I think in line with what League of Women Voters are saying is that politicians picking their people, this is a very obvious discovery of that, is that this information that we were battling around and arguing about and lots of people had public testimony about was laying on somebody's staff desk for 4 years. And I'm curious as to why it never surfaced in the process of forming the redistricting committee in the first place. And so having said that's snuck in the back door and this is out of process, I think is maybe a little more inflammatory than it needs to be, because this information, as I see it, was readily available, like I said, 4 years ago. So I want to set that straight. And I also want to look at some of the things that the Charter Review Committee had suggested for. Now, moving this from the code to the charter in itself is a big deal. I mean, the code means is that the Board of County Commissioners at will can change this on a 3-2 vote, 4-1 vote, 5-0 vote. They don't need the citizens to vote on this. But I think in the light of what we've been hearing in public testimony, that democracy is about the people. You know, it's by the people, it's of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I think to put some of these recommendations as putting distance between the Board of County Commissioners and their voters is a good idea. I just have a few comparisons to what was considered the backdoor proposal, which, like I said before, was been here for 4 years, compared to the new Charter Review Committee, is that the really differences for me and the deal killer for me is this, is that the Charter Review Committee wants to propose that they, in the final redistricting procedures, put forth toward the board one final map for mandatory board adoption. And I'm here to tell you, I represent 75,000 people in the Springfield District 2 of Lane County, and the recommendations of a committee is not going to force me to vote how I think my constituents wants me to vote. So to me, that's one of those deal killer items that I won't support this. And the second thing is that in the other proposal that was given so much criticism, they have a 2-tier check system in there that I really think we should look at as a county. They have between 2 and 4 maps being discussed and presented before the board for discussion and explanation. And then further, they recommend that a Citizens Advisory Committee is also recommended to vet the maps that they put forward. So you have not only a transparent process, but you have a board and citizenry process in place. What we naturally call in the political system a double check system. I mean, checks and balances, people call that. And I think that's worthy of looking at. So there's a number of other things in this long proposal that I like, that I think is fair, that I think is equitable, that I think is, obviously there's maybe some tweaks to it, but I think if we're going to make the effort of moving this particular item from the code into the charter, we need to get it right. And I feel like the last board, who was weighted, if you will, to a more left-leaning board, put this redistricting committee on a lane to produce maps that makes all 5 county commissioners come from Eugene. Now, let me reiterate this again. I got an email, another set of emails from a guy who said that we should look at our redistricting committee based on population. And the population, when you divvy it up, means that Eugene metropolitan population gets 2.3 votes out of 5. They don't get 4 or 5 votes out of 5, they get 2.3, and that some other district would have to absorb the 0.3 votes to make their vote whole. Springfield, by population, is awarded 0.8 votes. So logically, it would be that Springfield would loop in a portion of Eugene. That means that Eugene would then only have 3 votes out of the 5, not 5 votes out of the 5. And I think that's something very important that the public needs to understand what happened here. The board before picked people that would loop in maps that would make 5 out of 5 possible county commissioners come from the metro area of Eugene. And that's misrepresentation. The rural counties need to have their own representation and their own weighted vote so that they have an impact, an equal impact as all the other districts. So if that is another reason to adopt and like this proposal that quote-unquote snuck in the back door that had been here for 4 years, I think I would like to lean a discussion toward that, and I don't support the Charter Review Committee's recommendation for this item. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to put on the record that I do support the Charter Review Committee recommendation on issue paper number 2. It doesn't seem right now that we've got enough support on the board to move it forward. And I just want to also provide a clarification. You know, when we did redistricting, there was no nefarious work of us making all 5 commissioners be from Eugene. That did not happen. It is not a fact. And you can see from us all here sitting on the dais, we are all from different areas, from all over the county. And we didn't make the committee produce any particular maps on the dais. It did not happen, and that is not a fact. I would like to make it a more transparent process in the future. Redistricting won't happen for a while. This is not necessarily urgent, but hopefully in the future we will talk about it again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Seneca.
Yeah, this is a question for Chief of Staff, Ms. Williams. This email Vice Chair Lovell speaking about, was there any way for the Charter Review Committee to maybe to see that or to know it existed?
Chair, Commissioner, I might need to see a little bit more to understand. My understanding is your question, did they see how the proposals of potentially creating a redistricting committee might look before?
Yeah, so, I mean, if I'm understanding you, Vice Chair Lovell, you're saying was it from Harangue and Long that's been here with the county for 4 years?
Actually, it was from then County Council Steve Dingle sent that letter out, and it was at the behest of Bill Gary, who asked him to share that with the board, which means it had already been vetted and looked at legally before he shared it.
So that letter, the Charter Review Committee, I'm sounding like they didn't know about that letter.
Chair Commissioner, I don't believe that we discussed that or looked at that from the charter review perspective, no.
Gotcha. Okay. I was just thinking if they did see that letter, that would have, I could have seen them going down this path and not having two different possible redistricting ideas. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. The thing that I'm most interested in is getting politics out of districting. It's really hard to do. Every place you watch, every redistricting effort that you see, politics does enter into it. And I often talk about House District 11, which included Shedd and the University of Oregon in the same district. That completely disenfranchised the people of Shedd, because the University of Oregon, the voting mass, would always elect somebody who represented them more than represented the town of Shedd. That's not the only one. That was the Bradbury redistricting that took place that did the pie shape in Eugene. But wherever, look at jurisdictions across the nation. Whenever redistricting happens, somebody is going to say, and I hate the word gerrymander. I promise that I would only ever spit that word out because it's kind of overused, it's hackneyed. But really, in fact, if you look at redistricting, whenever it happens, people think something is foul. When the redistricting occurred 12 years ago, something was foul, according to a group of people. When the redistricting occurred 4 years ago or so, that brought the current districts that we have, there are people that said it's foul. So people are going to say it's foul whichever direction we go and wherever we come up with. Right now, the North Eugene District 4, the district that I represent, now includes Whitaker. I've been elected 19 times. I've won 19 elections. Never has Whitaker been in my district before this election. So it wasn't in my district this time. It was into my district for the first time ever. And it didn't affect the outcome of the election. But that being said, anytime the elected body gets involved in the election, there is a greater chance of people having a legitimate cry of foul. And I want to avoid that. I want to stay away from it. I want to get as far away from foul as we possibly can. And the only way to do that is to not have the first 5 appointees made by the Board of Commissioners. I can't agree with that because I don't think that lends itself to the ultimate outcome of fewer people saying foul. No matter what we do, I fear that people are going to say foul. Why would they stop today? Because it happens every single time. So that's what's going through my mind right now is how do we get to a point where our redistricting committee, if the 5 Board of Commissioners, there are only 5 of us, it's not 60 like the state, plus 30 like the state, plus 1 like the state. It's only 5, so it's very important that it's done in a fashion that doesn't lend the air, the smell of foul. So that's where my mind is on this, is how do we get to that point. The fact that the last redistricting committee we had was the first 5 were picked by the Board of County Commissioners, kind of similar to the recommendation of the Charter Review Committee. First 5 picked by the Board of County Commissioners. We ended up with 3 maps. I remember the maps very, very well. The first map was kind of minor adjustments to the existent commission districts. The second map had, I think it had Cresswell lumped into Eugene at some, it was, and that was rejected 5-0. I think it was Joe Burney that said that one clearly isn't going to work, which left us with 2 maps to look at. One, which was kind of the same map that we'd had, and the second was the map that adjusted it to put a large portion of Ferry Street Bridge into District 3, and a portion of Whitaker into District 2. And it also put the River Road area into District, whatever it is, 2, West Eugene. So a lot of people had reason to call foul. People in River Road were wondering why I was no longer their commissioner. People who live on Bodenhamer Road who had a fire yesterday were wondering who in the heck is their commissioner. They voted for 2 commissioners in the last 2 elections. The first time they elected Commissioner Seneca, the second time they elected me. They're confused by it. So really getting to a point where we're reducing the confusion as much as we possibly can. Understanding we'll never eliminate it. And reducing the fear and the smell of foul as much as we can is where we have to go. I firmly believe that, and I will adhere to the fact that the Board of Commissioners should not be involved, or should be involved as minimally as possible in the selection of the redistricting committee.
Thank you. So clearly, there's not agreement or particular interest in moving this item forward to the voters as it's recommended. I think the good news is we have lots of time to improve on our process for seating a redistricting committee. I do want to state for anyone watching who wasn't paying attention or wasn't aware at the time, we did make some attempts, I think, some really good process attempts in how we seated the committee, and that we asked to have the applications have the primary identifying information redacted. Now, of course, there were some who, in their narrative response to some of the questions, it made clear you could tell who the people were, but it was a good first pass. And I think what we should always be working toward, even if we can't get to agreement, is improvement. So we have opportunity to improve on how we seat a committee, who's on that committee, who selects it, how many maps, all of that. And there's plenty of time, right? Because redistricting rightly and with integrity happens when new census data is released, because the primary reason to redistrict is to ensure fair apportionment, that the number of voting households in each commissioner district is the same, and there's all kinds of standards that all committees can use to help arrive at apportionment and not unfairly advantage any particular group, and in fact ensure we don't disenfranchise any particular group. So the good news is we have lots of time to work on improving our process for seating a redistricting committee because there's plenty of years before new census data comes out. It's also come up in some of these conversations that there's a statewide initiative, IP14. I understand the chief petitioner of that has stated his intention to work toward getting that on the statewide ballot in 2028. That will refer only to state legislative seats, but there might be some lessons learned, and the conversation amongst the electorate as they consider a ballot initiative like that could be really instructive to a future board in how we want to manage redistricting here. So if this stays in the code, it makes it more nimble and gives us that opportunity to do some improvements and make some adjustments when the time comes, when the appropriate time comes to relook at apportionment and district maps. So that leaves us, unless there's any other comment, with just the one more item. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Regarding having time or not time, this year is a presidential election. So this November election is the one time where we will get the largest number, the greatest democratic process. You want as many people involved in a decision as possible. And the greatest involvement is the ballot box and the vote. And during a presidential election, we can anticipate a high turnout. And so if we do have a time issue, as we talked about a little bit with the three that we did pass forward, Ms. Williams, if we do have a time issue, is that if we don't get it on this ballot, then it's probably 4 years before we can really anticipate as anywhere near as large of a turnout as we can get on this ballot. And we all want the democratic process. We all want as many people to weigh in as possible, whether it be in a committee, whether it be in surveys, which sometimes people respond to, sometimes they don't, whether it be in public forums, which sometimes people respond to and sometimes they don't. At the ballot box, that's when people do respond. And when you say yes or no, that is the democratic process in this country. So I contend that we do have a time issue. If we do want to be on the November ballot, then we need to move forward with something today, or something by the next time we meet.
Thank you, Commissioner. Last I checked, there'll be another presidential election in 28, and we're not due to redistrict again till 32. So,
well, and according to the charter, well, okay.
So if we take no action on this, we continue to move forward with the charter as it is, which I think, as Ms. Williams stated earlier, also similar with this item, it's functioning. We can continue to operate. We've been operating. It's not something we need to do to keep this organization moving forward and do the business and the work before us. Right? Commissioner Seneca.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And Judy, I was going to run something by you. I was actually going to save it for Commissioner Business, and has to do with Ms. Reeves. Welcome. If we wanted a public legal look at the Harangue and Long amendment, what would that look like? That's probably better for Ms. Reeves. So it doesn't get tied up in attorney-client privilege. People can talk about it. We can have open dialogue. Everybody can see the findings. What can you do? Like just a public, here it is, this is what we see type of look at it?
Chair Trigger, Commissioner Seneca, Commissioners, your question is there a way to have a legal review that is public, that is not covered by attorney-client privilege, that doesn't risk waiver of attorney-client privilege? One way you could accomplish that is to have the Charter Review Committee request a public legal analysis of any amendments or proposals that you're interested in getting a legal review of. It could be the Harangue Long amendments. It could be any other proposal that you had an interest in receiving more information about. If the Charter Review Committee were to sort of commission a public legal review of any particular proposal, I think you could do that transparently and publicly. The risk of the commission itself, the Board of Commissioners, trying to do some kind of public legal review of something that you have already done an attorney-client privileged review of, that has been the discussion of Steve Thiel's memo, is that you risk waiver of that particular sort of communication and subject matter. And in order to protect the attorney-client privilege, you've already engaged counsel to provide you advice. To protect that particular advice and the privilege in general, you could move a different process to get the Charter Review Committee to review that publicly in a legal and transparent way, either the long proposals or any other proposal that you may be interested in having reviewed.
If I'm understanding, and Commissioner Seneca, maybe this is what you're asking, our Charter Review Committee is still technically seated. They just haven't had any scheduled meetings. When we appointed them for a term that doesn't end until the end of October of this year.
Correct.
So if I'm understanding, a recommendation or an assignment could be made if it received head nods to refer that proposal back to the committee, and because their meetings are publicly noticed, they receive support from staff as needed, whether that's from the Office of Legal Counsel or the clerk or anyone else, and they also have opportunities for public comment, and then they will have reviewed the proposal. I think, is that what you're getting at, Commissioner?
That's an option, but no. I'm actually with Ms. Reeves discussing, so it wouldn't necessarily waive the attorney-client privilege with Mr. Thiel, but it could get to that point, is what you're saying, if somebody challenged it and wanted to go through that whole process. But we could do a public review, get an analysis of it, and then if somebody wanted to waive the attorney-client privilege, then that would be a separate concern, right? It wouldn't automatically waive it?
I think that if you commissioned a new legal review, and my understanding is that Mr. Thiel's review was fairly high level. It was not an in-depth review of any
Correct.
of the proposals. If this commission were to commission legal counsel to do what they intended to be a public legal review with no attorney-client privilege attached to it, you could frame it that way. You could do that. The risk is that somebody might later come and say that you've waived privilege over the entire subject matter, and then, other communications about the same subject matter may be deemed waived. But that is, a bit of a speculative down the road exercise, and just a risk that you would have to weigh if you were to if this body were to ask for a public legal review of the same subject matter.
Right. Well, I think the want to see the high level, I don't know how long he's been looking at it. I mean, he did a great response. I don't think anybody would be interested in that if we had a public review out there that everybody could read. That's kind of where I'm at. I'd like me and my commissioners to consider this.
Commissioner Farr.
If I may follow up with a separate question. If this Board of Commissioners were to say, bring us back an order for the next board meeting that has the Harangue Long proposal as a charter amendment, wouldn't that trigger a legal review?
Chair Trigger, Commissioner Farr, I believe that this commission can order it can order staff to do whatever it wants to order, and that would include, if you ask them to bring it back as a board order, yes, I believe it would trigger a legal review.
Which would kind of dissolve whatever attorney-client privilege occurred in that letter, because then it would become a public document in the form of a board order.
Chair Trigger, Commissioner Farr, not having the benefit of the history of how county council operates, I don't know the status of those, whether or not the status of those legal reviews of all board orders is privileged or not. I don't know if those are treated as privileged or not.
Yeah, well, once the order is published, everybody sees it, so.
The order, yes, of course, is not a privileged document. If there's some kind of background attorney-client privileged review of the order before it gets to the commissioners, that would typically be a privileged document or privileged communication.
Thank you.
If I could, I would ask for, instead of us sort of throwing our best guess, a recommendation from county council of how to move forward. Clearly, there are some members of this board who would like there to be more discussion of this proposal that was brought to us through a private attorney and had been flagged for a private office of county council years prior. The reason what I'm guessing to Commissioner Farr's point is when this was initially requested to be brought to us in a board order as part of the public hearing, it was subject to legal review, and that high-level legal review raised enough concerns that we weren't in a position to make it a board order and put it in a packet presented as county work. So if you have a recommendation other than to refer it for analysis by our committee, which again gets support from the Office of Legal Counsel and the clerk and any others, if you have a recommendation for another way, if there are enough folks on this board that really want to see that proposal get a little more of an airing in public, please offer it up. I think it's really important that we move forward. This work has taken a lot of time on the part of our staff, on the part of this board, on the part of the public. I think we've really conflated a lot about charter review with redistricting, and I think it's time to get back to the important work of this board that we all agree on. This conversation that we're having now doesn't build more housing. It doesn't put more sheriff's deputies on the road. It doesn't raise us any more revenue. Doesn't protect the environment. Doesn't add any treatment beds. It doesn't do any of the things that we, all five of us, agree are the priorities of this board. So if you have a recommendation for how we can resolve the interest of some members of this board in having this community-driven private attorney's proposal to get a public airing, please offer it up so that we can move forward with the work of this organization and this board. Thank you.
Chair Trigger, Commissioners, and if I understand you, Chair, this is an option that does not include referring it back to the Charter Review Committee.
If you have one, or if you recommend that, just some way that we can move forward, because we're up here kind of spinning our wheels. Thank you.
Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
I would like a response that I've requested from the Office of Legal Counsel. Thank you.
Chair Trigger, Commissioners. So I will offer you two options. One option would be to refer it back to the Charter Review Committee with specific instructions to review either specifically the Stan Long proposals with a public legal review, and they could do that analysis in public meeting and with public transparency, with no intent for the legal review to be privileged in any way. So that would be one option. The other option would be, I guess I'll give you three. The second option would be that this board direct county council or somebody in county council's staff to provide a public legal review of the Stan Long proposal. knowing that there is a risk of potential waiver of the subject matter because you have already received privileged advice on that topic. The third option I would offer the board is to ask for a public legal review, not of the stand-alone proposal, but of the elements of what you want to have reviewed. So I've heard from the committee or from this board that there are certain principles that are important. Independence of the independent review committee, far apart as you can get from the Board of Commissioners, taking politics out, some kind of system that has different checks and balances, more transparency in the process. This board could ask for a legal review and options that meets those elements, that's not a specific review of any one particular proposal, like the Stan Lawn proposal, but more direction to staff about how do we legally build a process that have the elements that we think that we find value around and that we want to have in that redistricting process, as opposed to sort of focusing it on one particular proposal versus another. Those would be three options I could offer the board chair.
Thank you. And I assume that could just be an assignment with head nods. It doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, question. I mean, before we do that, if we do that particular thing, Ms. Reeves, can we make sure that something gets on the ballot by November 5th? I mean, obviously, we're under the gun here. We're pushing it pretty hard. The more committees we form and the more people that we involve in all of that kind of thing, we need to get it done fairly soon, because I think it's important that we involve the people we're speaking of. So is that something that we can do, or do we use that as a motion, or do we use that as a staff direction from the board? What would be the most effective way?
A vice chair level, Chair Trigger, commissioners, I think you could do it as staff direction in terms of having enough time to get it on the ballot. That's really within this board to figure, you all have to vote to refer it. And so certainly there are tight timelines, and if you were to direct staff to get you something back by a certain date, staff could do that, and then the board would still have to consider at the next, I think you have 2 meetings left before you need to refer something to the ballot. So I can't definitively answer that for you, Vice Chair.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I think, is it out of order? Do we want to wait to do a board assignment, Chair?
Well, we do have the assignments portion of the meeting. I'm not sure if you're suggesting you want to move on. We still just have the one item recommended amendment around the Charter Review Committee itself. We could move to...
Well, I've got a couple, maybe we'll just throw this out. I could either make a motion or make a directive to the staff. I'd like to direct staff to come back with the board order.
You would like to...
I'm just throwing this out for discussion, not necessarily a board or a motion. Just what I've got here is what I've been hearing and writing down. I would like to at least have a discussion about these items, if it's appropriate. I would like to direct staff to come back with a board order by our next meeting, July 30th, 2024, which includes the Charter Review Committee review with the items and statutes of the Harangue and Long, along with board suggestions for the formation of the redistricting committee standards, which could be put forth for a public vote in time for the November 5th election.
A clarification, if I may?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. So the Charter Review Committee would have to meet between now and then to conduct that review.
I think that, what I'm hearing people say, I think that's what would be including the Charter Review Committee in the process, although it's under a tight timeline, I understand. But I think we can work with that.
Commissioner Seneca.
I would ask our Chief of Staff if that's even a possibility.
Chair, Commissioners, is your question specifically, as I was trying to track and write this down, is the question to have the Charter Review Committee make that recommendation prior to actually you said on the 30th. So you're asking if the Charter Review Committee can meet and recommend this?
Yeah, I mean, there was more words than that to it, but yeah, I mean, is there a possibility for the charter review committee to meet and go over this harangue and law between now and the 30th and have because you'd have to have the recommendation done also.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, Commissioner. I did, based on our conversation at our last board meeting, in which I think you also asked what are some proposals moving forward, one of which I did suggest the Charter Review Committee, so I did just inquire. Again, we would need a quorum, and so they haven't met in a while. I did inquire, and I did hear back from 6 of the 7 that were willing to. We didn't talk about specifics, and I know it is summertime, so I can't really answer that well without getting back to them and trying to figure out schedules with staff and at least 6 or who are interested. That material is technically due tomorrow for coming back for the July 30th board meeting. I think there is more potentially for the August 6th board meeting. Again, that is our last one, but it just does give staff and a little bit more time to do something like that.
I will just procedurally point out, there's a motion on the table, it has not been seconded. And what I'm hearing essentially is a willingness or interest to refer this back to the committee so that it can be given a public, it's due in a public process. I'm really struggling to understand the urgency and the haste, why it is so important that this be on this November's ballot when we are not due to redistrict until 2032. And I would like to think that it is more important that we do things thorough and well than that we do them quickly when there is no real deadline. So I am all for having the committee look at this proposal. I have been from day one. Again, provides an opportunity for full review with support from staff, including legal counsel. There are public meetings. There's opportunities for public comment. We cannot compel volunteers to meet on a particular timeline other than that they are seated through October. That is the timeline. And I'm really hard-pressed to understand the urgency on the part of some of my colleagues. So again, there is a motion on the table. It has yet to receive a second. Perhaps it can be withdrawn and a more streamlined one can be offered. Perhaps not. I will leave it to my colleagues.
Can we have a restating of the motion, please?
I move to direct staff to come back with a board order by our next meeting, July 30th, including the Charter Review Committee review with the items and statutes of the harangue law, along with the board suggestions for the formation of a redistricting committee standards, which could be put forth before the public for a vote in time for the November 5th, 2024 general election.
Yeah, I'll second. Seems clear to me.
It's been moved by Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Senega. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. So here's my discussion to the motion. What this allows for is to continue to move forward, whether or not ultimately we do place something on the November ballot. It doesn't place a full stop on the discussion at this point in time. It allows a Charter Review Committee, based on the motion, to take a look at it, which is the, what's it called? What do we call that proposal? The stand-alone proposal, is that what people are calling it? And I've looked at that, and there are parts of it that do fulfill the things that I've stated regarding the Board of Commissioners being out of the loop, more out of the loop on the recommendations. So I'd be in favor of the Charter Review Committee taking a look at that, absolutely. So I'm in favor of the motion.
For clarification, Commissioner Farr, the motion includes some specific dates, coming back to us July 30th and ensuring the work is completed in time to put it on the November ballot. Those are the parts of the motion that I have that I do not support. And so I want to clarify that those are important to you, that those dates be included, that you feel that.
Well, I believe that by including those dates, Ms. Williams, we've asked if those dates are possible, and you said maybe. So to me, the dates are a little bit tentative. If we receive a full stop on that, and the full stop would be that we cannot assemble the Charter Review Committee by those dates, then those dates aren't met, and therefore the motion is the staff cannot fulfill the intent of the motion.
Chair and Commissioner, just to clarify, when I did ask the members of the Charter Review Committee, I simply asked if they were available. So knowing that we do technically have them seated until October, I didn't float any dates or specifics by them at this point. So I think when I was mentioning a couple of dates as a potential, knowing that it's almost 2 weeks, and to try and get as legal counsel said, we will try and turn this over as quickly as possible. There's a staff component to doing that work, as well as coordinating and getting the committee together to review and do their work, and then propose and bring that back to the board. And so that it's nearly 2 weeks from here, which is a little, again, open to doing what is the will of the board and directed. I had thrown out an additional potential date of our August 6th board meeting just as another potential. That gives a little bit more time. Again, just trying to speak to the timelines as was asked.
You've almost clarified that in my mind. Probably everybody else understands it, but let me make sure that I do. In order to get it on the November ballot, which is a very robust election coming up in November, in order to get it on that ballot, we could do it as late as August 6th.
Correct.
So, so the motion, as it's stated, gives July 30th as the deadline. That gives a pretty short time frame to get to assemble the Charter Review Committee. That's daunting.
Maker of the motion could amend the date.
And
Then I think if the motion were to amend it to be August 6th, then that would make it more doable and potentially move us forward in the direction which may wind up in a dead end. And the ultimate achievement on this would be a full public weigh-in on November 5th. So if the maker of the motion is interested in amending the date, that would retain my support.
I would ask if the maker of the motion is willing to remove reference to any dates, given that the committee is seated through October. By definition, it has to be concluded by then, and perhaps replace with some, as soon as possible. Because again, we also haven't consulted with staff about agenda items that may already be slated for July 30th. We don't know if we actually have the time for this to come back and give it its due, for the committee to meet, and get recommendation, or get the work done in advance for the board packet to be prepared in time, working backwards from that date. So again, I am really at a loss to understand the push to put this on this November's ballot for something relating to redistricting, which is not due for many more years. And I understand the interest in a general election and high turnout, but there is another one of those between now and the next redistricting. So with that, I'll ask the maker of the motion if he'd like to withdraw his motion, amend it, or have it stand.
I will amend the motion to have the board come back by August 6, 2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to amend the motion. So we have just procedurally, make sure I'm doing this right. We haven't voted on the first motion. I always get boxed up about, we could vote simply on whether to amend the first motion, is that right? And then the amended motion is what's on the table for a vote? Is that right, Ms. Reeves?
Sorry.
Do you need me to restate that? Yeah, I know you're taking notes. So we have an amended motion on the table. Is the proper procedure to take the vote on amending the motion? And if that passes, we are then back to the original motion but amended? What is procedurally? We didn't take a vote on the original motion, and now we have an amendment.
Chair Trigger, I believe that you would take a vote on the amendment and then vote on the amended motion.
So first vote is to accept the amendment.
Now we'd vote on the amendment.
I will take legal counsel's advice on this. Thank you, Commissioner Farr. I know you have a depth of experience, but I did address counsel, and I will wait for her response. Thank you.
Chair Trigger, we've consulted and we believe that since the original maker of the motion and the original seconder of the motion both agree on the amendment, that you don't need to vote on the amendment.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So then my question for staff is if, and for the board, as Commissioner Farr said, if it's just a dead end, it is. It seems like a lot of work for a dead end. If you can't assemble the committee in time, if staff isn't available, time to provide the needed consultation to the committee for them to bring something back to us August 6th, then what happens? Again, if we keep it a little more nimble, we have more opportunity to do this right. So what happens if you can't convene a quorum of the committee, staff isn't available, we can't prepare the board packet in time? And my same question for August 6th. I don't know what that agenda looks like. I don't have the future agenda items document up in front of me.
I can take a first pass at this, and feel free to, County Administrator, jump in. I think what we have more capacity is around staff and turning this around and making it work per the board's direction. Looking back at the bylaws of the Charter Review Committee does specify there's a quorum, of which would be 4. So I can't speak to the availability. So if that deadline did pass and they weren't available to meet and discuss and have a decision, in which you would need a quorum, I think we would come back on that board meeting and provide progress or an update and options, and then give that back over to you, Chair and Board. And feel free to jump in if there's anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tight timeline, and so even August 6th, I think the deadline, our technical deadline for materials for August 6th would be tomorrow.
Yes,
So it's 2 weeks in
technically
advance.
yes, absolutely.
But we can, where other items, so we can push, I'm just saying, technically that's what it would be. We can, I think, we'll make every effort to convene the committee to meet and discuss the issue and bring that. What I heard from the motion was ultimately the result is you want a board order to come forward on August 6th. Ideally, with having the Charter Review Committee having reviewed the material and made a recommendation and some feedback on that. But regardless, we'll have a board order brought forward on the 6th. We'll make every effort to convene the Charter Review Committee. If for some reason we're not able to pull together a quorum to meet in advance, or they can't provide a recommendation in advance of when the materials ultimately will need to be due, which is really probably 2 weeks from now, including legal review. So hopefully that's, a little bit clearer than mud.
Thank you. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I find it highly disturbing that the board majority would be interested in elevating a private attorney's recommendation to a board order without vetting in advance. But if you are intent on pushing this through, the only right thing to do would be to add a public hearing, and ideally more than one, because this is an entirely different board order with different materials that the public needs to vet. And I would also prefer the Charter Review Committee to vet. And trying to push it within the 3 weeks we have left doesn't make an iota of sense right now. It really just is puzzling, unless there is some other intent after the election. And I would like to think the best of my colleagues, but right now I am not. This is highly problematic. And if you're going to push this through, the public needs to have a public hearing. They need to be able to come and speak to it since it will be entirely different than what is being presented to us today. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, can I, sorry, I just
Yeah,
want to
please.
make one clarification. My point about, so the request is to bring a board order back by August 5th, have the Charter Review Committee review it. Prior to that, when I made the comment, because there are a couple of due dates we're talking about election due dates, and then we're also talking about due dates for materials for the board. So in our traditional process, materials are due 2 weeks in advance, and we can push that as long as we're able to have legal review. So I just want to be clear, so everyone is, so that's clear to everyone that the due date for materials for the August 6th board meeting would be this week, but we can move into late next week, I think, as long as we have legal review in advance of that. And then it's my understanding that the due date for election materials is August 6th,
August 16th is the,
August 16th
Yeah.
is the due date, okay.
But the 6th is our last meeting before then.
Chair, may I ask a clarifying
Please.
question? So as part of the motion was to refer it back to the Charter Review Committee to review the harangue long proposal with the suggestions or recommendations of the board. There was some language about also with recommendations from the board, and I'm not sure it's clear what those are. And so the staff and the committee would need direction about what was intended with that part of the motion.
So again, do you need the motion restated? If it's the intention of this board to have the Stan Long proposal reviewed in a public, open process, that happens by referring it back to the committee. If there is a majority of members of this board that for some reason has to have this on the ballot in November, which seems to be the direction people are trying to push this in for some reason, that's the only reason to have dates inserted in the motion.
Chair, the language that was in the motion was to refer it back to the CRC committee to review the harangue proposal with the quoted language, along with board suggestions. And so I think it's the board's suggestions that staff and the committee would need direction on what those suggestions are.
I see.
And if I've misstated Vice Chair's motion, I apologize for that.
If I may.
Please, Vice Chair.
Yeah, just comments on that. Obviously, I'm trying to make a motion on the fly, and I haven't had but 28 seconds to think about it. What my intention was, is I wanted to include all of the people that the public has berated and suggested and wanted to have in the process, so that this is transparent and whole. And so I wanted to include not only the Charter Review Committee, but also the board itself, because the board has the power and the ability and the will to make suggestions alongside of the Harangue and Lang proposal. And I don't really want to try to get away from the brand name of that, but I want to also state that in this email that I've got on April 21st of 2020 from Mr. Steve Dingle, what we're calling the Harangue and Lang proposal verbatim is an attachment to that email. So the fact that this has been somehow put forward at late date, it's been sitting on somebody's desk for 4 years. So I'm a little bristled by the comments that there's some nefarious thing going on. I think my intention is to keep this momentum rolling and not kick this can down the road for 4 years. We're the board. The board has a Charter Review Committee that made suggestions that they wanted redistricting to happen. And I think it's up to us to make it happen. And I think it's up to us to make it happen at the soonest possible event, which is the November 5th election. I've got no other ulterior motives or no snidely things that are done in the dark room. I just want to get it done. I don't want to kick it down the road. I think we're ready for a vote.
Are you calling the question, Vice Chair?
I'm just asking a suggestion. I think we're ready for a vote.
Would it help, does staff or county council need the vote restated before we take a vote, or are you clear on what is on the table before us?
Alternate to legal counsel, I think we have a good understanding, but
I believe the motion is clear.
Would you like to restate the motion before we take a vote, Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I move to direct the staff to come back with a board order by our next meeting after the following meeting. I guess I should say I move the staff to come back with a board order by the meeting of August 6, 2024, including the Charter Review Committee's review with items and statutes included in the Harangue Long proposal, along with board suggestions for the formation of the redistricting committee standards, which could be put before the public for a vote in time for the November 5th, 2024 general election.
Is that the motion you seconded? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. Motion carries 3-2 with Commissioners Trieger and Buck dissenting. We still have not discussed the item of a Charter Review Committee amendment in the charter. If we could bring that up, please. Thank you. Give us just a quick review on this again, please, Ms. Williams, while we
sure, Chair, thank you.
reorient.
Yeah, so this is really clean up on clarifying what the dates are involved. So again, this is a committee that would be meeting every 10 years. In historical context of how it was worded, it was a little bit confusing and just used a set date. So this is clarifying that moving forward. So starting in 2034 and then every 10 years after that. We also expanded the start date to, again, give a little bit more time, primarily for staff, as we are routinely every 10 years doing a couple of big efforts such as redistricting, followed by a charter review committee. So this just gives a little bit more time in between. Thanks.
Is there interest in considering this amendment be referred to the voters, or any other discussion? I'm seeing one person shaking their head. No, no, no. Right. Yes, we would not have the votes to refer this, so we don't need to discuss it any further. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That concludes, unless there's anything else from staff on this item,
Thanks.
concludes that item. We are on to item 11. Thank you, Ms. Reeves, for your support. Item 11 on the agenda today is Commissioners' business. Do we have any announcements from Commissioners? Seeing none. Any future board assignment?
Sure.
Oh, Commissioner Farr.
Just this morning I mentioned the wildfire called Bodenhamer Road, and I called out the Eugene Springfield Fire Department as being the respondents, but also Lane Rural Fire Department and a number of other fire departments were instrumental in helping control that blaze. So the firefighters in general, Ms. Mokreisky, really turned out in force to make certain that no homes were destroyed and that the blaze was indeed curtailed, stopped completely before it reached any residences.
Are there any future board assignment requests? Seeing none. None to review. Any other business before we conclude for the day? Seeing none at the sound of my gavel, we will be adjourned. Our next scheduled meeting of the Board of Commissioners is Tuesday, July 30th and/or Wednesday, the 31st. I will note that it is possible a quorum may be in attendance at any portion of this Wednesday, tomorrow's Joint Committee on Transportation event being held by our legislative colleagues, but no action will be taken and commissioners will not deliberate toward any decision. Thank you. We are adjourned.